Hi, I'm Annmarie Seldon with the National Library of Patient Rights and Advocacy, and my guest today is Jason Euzukonis. He's a patient advocate for a rare disease, a co-leader of the Young Waldenstrom's support group, a New England sales rep for Brooks Running, and a lifelong avid runner, husband and father of two. Welcome, Jason.
Hi, glad to be here. Thank you.
Thanks for taking the time. Let's talk a little bit about your background and your current patient advocacy work.
Yeah, so I was diagnosed with Waldenstrom's macrogobulinemia about a little over 6 years ago now, and I've learned a lot along the way. I'm somewhat of a research geek, and but yeah, as time has gone on, and I've went through my early phase of trauma and stress and anxiety, and learned a lot more about this world of cancer and what you can do to improve your outcome. And as time went on, I started to, in a way, feel fortunate and lucky about my situation. So I kind of felt like it was time I start trying to give back a little bit. So wherever possible, and with a hectic life, I've just tried to help others in whatever way I can. I think probably the best way I've been able to do that so far at this point is through various support groups. I'm involved in a handful of them, one of which being the Young WM support group. And it's always, you know, uh, whenever you come across some uh, folks that have been recently diagnosed, I think it's just, I don't know if it enjoy is quite the right word, but it's, I sort of take it upon myself to try and help get them pointed in the right direction and realize, or help them realize all that they can do to improve their situation. So most of my work so far at this point has been done through being involved in various support groups, I've done a handful of interviews now around patient advocacy and informed decision making between the doctor and the patient. So that's for the most part, that's been the extent of my involvement so far. My hope is to do more as time goes on. I have two young children and work full time, so there's that balance of life and trying to give more of my time. But hopefully as time goes on, I can get more involved in various organizations such as the IWMF. So
I
yeah.
like that you talk about informed decision making because I feel like when people are first diagnosed, that's not even in their realm. So talk about what you mean by informed decision making.
Yeah, I mean, when you get diagnosed with cancer, I mean, it's I was shell shocked, and I think that's pretty common for most people. It's a life altering experience, and I think when you get in that situation, it's just hard to really even think about the idea that you have options. I think I would say some cancer centers are better than others in my experience. I worked with three doctors and settled with a fantastic team of doctors at Dana-Farber. Um, it, it could have been a better experience than what I've got there. But I think for the most part, oftentimes in our world, there are a lot of doctors that are very well intentioned, and I think oftentimes they're just overburdened. But there is sort of this tendency to just sort of, okay, here's the diagnosis, this is your treatment, and we're moving on, next patient. And I think the patient oftentimes just doesn't realize because they just haven't had I'm 6 years in. I've learned a lot. I know the right questions to ask. There will come a point in time when I need to move on to a new treatment, and I'll huddle up with my doctor and we'll go review the options. But most patients don't even realize that there are options. So I guess in a nutshell, that's probably the best way I can summarize and informed decision making is that the the good news is in the world of cancer, more and more there are options. And typically there are pros and cons to each option. So I think it's sort of best to have that conversation with the doctor about your options, what the pros and cons are, what might be best for you, both from in terms of the outcome, but also lifestyle. So whether it's in an infusion or in the form of a pill. So
And all of that can be very scary, but as the one point is being part of a support group can help manage kind of going through the process? How important is it to be part of a support group?
I think it's critical on multiple fronts. I mean, the support groups I've been involved in, especially the ones through the IWMF, the International Waldenstrom's Macrogobulinemia Foundation, have been huge in my journey. First off, the good news is there is more and more optimism every day that we're learning more and more about Waldenstrom's and all forms of cancer. And the treatments keep getting better. And I've sort of had to shift my mindset to the idea that of living with cancer. There's a very good chance that I'll live a normal lifespan. But I also know that along the way, I'm going to have multiple forms of treatment. I guess the point is that, I'm going to be around for a long time. So and I think in terms of the outcomes, there's lots of optimism, but the idea of living with cancer is a different mindset than I think we've been used to over the years. Typically, someone gets diagnosed with cancer and you tend to think worst case scenario and how many years have I got to live? Well, the good news is we can expect to live a very long time now, but emotionally, that's a tough one to deal with every day.
Right. And,
So that's
education is so important because, with your particular cancer, when you're first diagnosed, sometimes general practitioners don't really understand very specific diagnoses of blood cancer. So when you're first diagnosed, how important is it to advocate for yourself?
Yeah, I mean, I wish that I would have known more when I was diagnosed. I was lucky that I happen to have someone that took me by the arm and said, "Here, come this way. This is what you need to go get a second opinion." It took me a while to figure that out, but it's absolutely critical to be able to advocate for yourself, ask questions. The doctors should be willing to do that. If you have time, getting a second opinion is always a great idea. Usually, most doctors are absolutely open to you going to get a second opinion, especially if it's a situation like Waldenstrom's where it's a rare cancer. Where I first started, the first doctor I saw he said he saw 1 to 2 patients a year with Waldenstrom's, whereas as we know, Dana-Farber sees I think over 1,000 is I believe. So anyhow, the point being that I think particularly when you're dealing with a rare cancer, I think it's very important to advocate for yourself, ask questions, get a second opinion if possible, and most doctors should be very open to that.
Great insights. So what do you think are some of the top and most important things that you wish someone told you when you first got diagnosed? For example, don't Google.
Yeah. There's a lot of inaccurate information online or through Dr. Google. Oftentimes that information is outdated anyways, as we know. What's public is information that's likely already a couple of years old, whereas your doctor is going to be much more up to speed with where the current treatments are. If I don't think it's a great idea to ask the doctor how long are you going to live, because nobody knows the answer to that. And I think it's also reasonable to be much more optimistic than what the numbers say, because the treatments are getting better every day. So don't ask the doctor how long you're going to live. Everyone's different. But you just have to. My feeling is that you just have to keep researching and learning as much as you can about your disease from reliable sources. And I think you can always ask your doctor what some good sources of information are. You don't want to be pestering your doctor every day with questions. So if you want to do your own research and learn about the disease, learn about the options, the pros and cons to of each of those options as far as treatments go. And I think for me, it's a lot of it too is just as best as you can take care of yourself, both your physical health, your mental health, in terms of the daily daily things that you can do when you're diagnosed with cancer.
Good point. Good
Yeah.
point. Let's talk a little bit about the daily things we can do to continue to advocate for ourselves. Or are there things that you do on a daily basis, such as exercise, that really can make a difference?
Yeah, and when you're first diagnosed, especially if you are, I know folks that have that go through chemotherapy, and that can be pretty taxing at first. So I don't tell people to start suddenly changing their diet or getting out. Do whatever you can, keep your head above water, because it's going to be exhausting in the beginning. But once you're a little more ready and the energy starts to come back, there's a lot of evidence around some degree of exercise and how that improves outcomes. And I think some people hear that and they think, well, I don't want to. Exercise can be just a simple walk in nature, things of that nature, things like that. Just being on your feet, moving around, gardening, little things like that can go a long way. Most cancer centers or hospitals will have a nutritionist on site as well to help guide you in terms of what to eat, what not to eat. Not that I think you have to get super rigid, and what works for some people may not work for others. That's I think nutrition's a very personalized thing, but
you're right. Absolutely, with supplements as well, that's a tricky road to go down as well, but doing anything you can to boost your immune system, I think.
Yeah. And I do take supplements, but I also, whatever supplements I do take, I always run it by my doctor first, because you just never know what kind of interaction there might be between supplements and a treatment. So yeah, anything that goes in me that isn't food, I always run by my doctor.
Very good points. Very good points. Is there anything else you'd like to add about, anything patient related? I think you brought up some great points about, daily activities, I think is very important. And the mental aspect of it is very important to make sure you're making decisions for you, but also going to the source of information and not Google.
Right. And that's the tough one, because there's just more and more information out there that's not always accurate. So yeah, that's probably one of the biggest challenges is making sure you're staying up to date on what's latest in terms of treatments and what options there may be for you. But yeah, again, getting to a reliable source when it comes to that. But outside of that, I mean, I'm involved again in multiple support groups, and I think the good news with Waldenstrom's is there is lots of optimism. But even I'm in a support group that has people with all forms of cancer, and there's some really challenging situations in there, but as best as I can, and when it's reasonable, I always try to pass off that message of being optimistic. And they're just learning more and more every day. And we do know that an upbeat, positive attitude also impacts outcomes in the long run. So I think that's sort of the other bit of that I try to pass on to those that I come in contact with.
Well, great. Thank you, Jason, for taking the time. I really appreciate it. I'm Annmarie Seldon, and we will see you next time.
Thank you.